I'm not sure. Okay, so I am now. Okay. Hey, it's Michelle Flood, eXp Realty. Welcome to Live Life Whimsically. Today we're going to talk about real estate, which I talked about on Friday too. I don't always do that, but today I felt like I probably should. There's so many changes that are going on in the market. I ran across an article in the Florida Realtors magazine I kind of wanted to talk about. Um, I try to do different things whenever I do go live, but like I said, just weirdness has happened and it's been mostly real estate related. So I thought that we would talk a little bit about the market and the way things are changing right now. Um, I did this earlier today and I had all kinds of good stuff I wanted to say to you guys. And hopefully, as I go through this article, I'll remember all of it. It's really about what's changing in the country real estate wise, in particular, what's happening in Florida. And even though things are changing, with the way the market is moving and how houses are kind of staying on the market a little bit longer than they were before, Florida is a little atypical in how it changes. It's a different breed of real estate, and there are things that affect it that don't affect other places, and vice versa. The other thing I wanted to talk about was interest rates and how everybody's kind of freaking out over the interest rates. I'm old enough to remember when interest rates for houses were 14%. At the start of this year, rates were probably about half of what they are, maybe a little more than half or a little less than half of what they are right now. And that's, you need to understand why that happens. The market, especially during the 2 years that we had COVID, was artificially stimulated. And it was artificially stimulated because everybody was staying home and nobody was really spending any money. And so the government decided they needed to drop those interest rates so people would start buying houses because we weren't spending money on anything else. And then, as things changed, they're trying to slow that pace down. The only problem that I see with this and the way I see it going is the way it went kind of in 2008, but I think it'll probably be on steroids. And this is really just my opinion about that, is that you had a lot of corporate buyers that came in and paid cash for those properties. And then you may have even had people that, had decent credit and went into places. I heard today that Lennar is in big trouble. Maybe not in every single market, but particularly in markets where the houses were just last month $100,000 higher in price than they are right now. So you've got people that closed on a house in September or August, and they might have paid $100,000 more for that house than now a new person coming in and buying the exact same mile across the street from them. And so as things adjust, if people have issues paying those mortgages, or maybe somebody had a whole bunch of money and they were able to buy a house and buy down the mortgage and have a little bit of cash in reserve or take a second mortgage out on their property. If things adjust and they have to sell and their house goes upside down, now they're going to have to do what we called back in the day, and what you've probably heard before, is a short sale. And a short sale means that you're upside down on your mortgage payment and you can't afford and you can't sell the house for what you paid for it. So what happens when somebody has a short sale is that you can put the house on the market as the seller, and then you can get a contract on that property for what the actual value currently is for the house. But what happens is then you have to go to the bank that holds the mortgage, and then they have to sign off on it and say that it's okay for you to sell the house at that price. If you had a current mortgage, maybe you paid it down a whole lot, and then you got a second mortgage so that you could maybe get some things done to your property to increase the value, but now you still are upside down and something happens and you have to sell that house for less than what it's worth. You have two mortgage companies that you have to go to ask permission. And generally we don't see two mortgages agree with that, because the one that has the lesser mortgage or came second is the one that gets paid second. So if you have to do some kind of reorganization, some kind of a bankruptcy, and you want to pay your debts off, the first mortgage company is going to get paid, but the second mortgage company probably isn't. And then they're going to look at you and say, no, go rub, you're not going to sell this house. And then you're in that house until the foreclosure process ends. And then what will happen is that the bank will come in and they'll do a few things. They'll slap some paint on the outside. They might put some new carpeting in it, do a nice little curb appeal thing done to it, paint your door. And then they're going to look around at what everybody's selling the house for in that neighborhood. And they're going to undersell what those people are trying to sell their houses for, because they can. Because mortgage companies have historically and always will have safety nets in the way that they loan their money. So they have insurance on the mortgage. The federal government backs a lot of those mortgages and helps bail them out. They were paid way more on the front end of the loan than they should have been. All of these things will make it so that the bank wins, we don't, and that's how it works. So this is about climate change and how that's factoring into what buyers and sellers are doing in the state of Florida. And I read this article earlier today, and I really thought it was interesting, so I thought we would go over it. And I really wanted to react to it live, which is what I did when no one could hear me, but we'll go through it again, and I'm sure the same thoughts will occur to me, if not different ones at this point. And I'll put this in the description box so you could read it yourself. This is called, the article was called More Buyers, Sellers Factor in Climate Change. It's written by Carrie Smith and was in the Florida Realtor magazine just a couple of days ago here in October. It says 2 out of 3, 62% buyers worry about climate change, though it's usually a factor in a moving decision, not a litmus test. Many still pick near beaches. Seattle, nearly 2/3, 62% of U.S. residents who plan to buy or sell a home in the next year hesitate to move to an area known for natural disasters, extreme temperatures, and or rising sea levels, according to a report from Redfin. The share is higher among younger generations, high earners, Democrats, and people living in the Northeast. 71% of Gen Zers respondents hesitate to move to one of those high-risk areas compared to 52% of baby boomers. And the reason why baby boomers don't worry about moving to those kinds of places is, still typically conventional mortgages are the norm, and baby boomers tend to have more discretionary cash, which means they can pay cash for a property if they want to. They don't have to have hazard insurance and hurricane insurance or flood insurance on their property. If their shit gets knocked down tomorrow, they can go back and they can rebuild with their cash, where Gen Zers probably don't have the luxury of doing so. And I guess in a certain aspect, neither do baby boomers if the land is gone like it is down south by Honeymoon Island. And, you got to take that into consideration too. 69% of respondents who identified as Democrat would be hesitant, compared with 58% of Republicans. 68% of respondents in the Northeast were likely to express hesitance, compared to 59% of those in the South. I guess because we're used to it down here, right? While a majority of respondents expressed skepticism about moving to risky areas, however, a lot of people still move there. That concern about risk is often offset by relatively affordable homes and or access to warm weather and the outdoors. Cape Coral, Northport, and Tampa, 3 Florida metros impacted by Hurricane Ian. They consistently rank on Redfin's list of top migration destinations based on a comparison of number who want to move there versus how many want to move out. One of the main questions I get from buyers is, where can I move that's close to the beach but not in a flood zone? And I can tell you right now, I'm working with somebody who must have said that phrase to me a million times. And it's really hard to get people to understand that if a hurricane like Ian smacked into the Tampa Bay area, where I sit in Hudson would be affected. If something that large hits us, we're all affected, just like how it happened down south. So they ask, where can I be close to the beach but not in a flood zone, says Isabel Arias Squires, a Redfin real estate agent in Fort Myers. The answer is nowhere. If you're not in a flood zone this year, you may be in one in a couple of years from now. And that's because they redraw the lines all the time. I remember when the lines for where I live here in Pasco County were just to the east side of US 19. And now they come all the way across, some as far up as Little Road, which is probably a good 5-6 miles from the coast. This is Florida. Hurricanes and flooding come along with the territory. Home buyers should always purchase flood insurance and invest in impact windows if they can. And if you're going to sell your house, that's really important too. The impact windows, the strap downs in on your roof, those things are very important. So if you're considering doing any kind of a remodel, I'd start with my windows. I would consider my doors. I would change my doors to be the kind that open out and not in. And then you want a hurricane reinforced garage door too to help you with the wind mitigation there as well. And if you're going to go buy a property, I would go get my mortgage and, get that, talk to my mortgage person, find out how much house I can afford. I would figure out where I wanted to live, and I would get a house. I would pick a house out, and I would send that house to my insurance agent. And I would say, if I buy this property, what is this house going to cost me to insure? Even if it's not the one, especially if it's not the one, that's the one you need to start with so that you have an idea of what you're looking at insurance wise. So that's one of the things I would do just to make sure that I could afford the insurance that was going to be on that property. One of the main questions I get from buyers, sorry, I already did that. Let's move on. The flood insurance, that was the other thing she said. Home buyers should always purchase flood insurance and invest in impact windows if they can. Flood insurance is subsidized by the federal government. Usually when something like what Ian did to us happens, they will rethink their amount of what that's going to cost you. They'll kind of pull out, they'll probably pass that risk on to people to the buyers so that they'll have to pay more than they would have normally. So that's always important. Flood insurance is important to have no matter where you are in the state of Florida, even if you don't live in a flood zone. Area Squires is working with one out-of-state buyer who was under contract to purchase a second home sight unseen in Cape Coral when Hurricane Ian made landfall. And that's what my buyer is doing at sight unseen as well. While the home only sustained minor damage, the buyer decided to back out, but then changed their mind because they didn't want to lose their escrow deposit and realized they could make money as a landlord. Yeah, a hurricane is not a good reason for you to say, I'm going to cancel my contract. And they will either sue you for specific performance, try to get a judge to make you buy that house, or they're going to keep your money. They're going to keep your deposit. And if you do a substantial down payment on a property, and if you're by the water and you saw that stuff happen, you probably put a substantial down payment on, they're going to keep your money. They're going to win. And that's what's going to happen. Demand for rentals is surging because so many people were displaced by the storm and need a place to live, says Area Squires. There's one home in Cape Coral that's asking $7,500 a month, which is almost unheard of. My out-of-state buyer plans to rent their new home out for 6 months and then make that their second home. They've still never seen it in person. While places most endangered by natural disasters remain popular with many home buyers, that could shift as young people who grew up learning about climate change become a larger force in the housing market, says Redfin chief economist Daryl Fairweather. That's funny, right? Fairweather. The harsh reality is that most areas face at least some climate risk. House hunters should do their own research to get a sense of where their families and finances will be safest. That might mean avoiding cities that in a decade could be underwater or have no water at all. Anywhere in Florida could be underwater. Anywhere. Climate risk as a factor in decision to relocate. 40% of respondents who plan to buy or sell a home in the next year said the risk of natural disasters, extreme temperatures, and or rising sea levels play a role in their decision to move. More than half, making at least $100,000 a year, said that risk played a role in their decision to relocate in the next year, compared to less than 40% of those making under $100,000. And that's probably because people making under $100,000 don't always have the means to move from where they live. 66% said climate change impacted their home search in at least one way. The most common impact was to consider homes that included certain features, 17%, and that it impacted their home buying budget, 17%. So, along with those impact resistant windows, generators, and the correct roof, comes a higher price tag. And when you have interest rates going up, that makes things more difficult as well. 15% of buyers and sellers said climate change caused them to search in different areas, and 15% said it changed their search timeline. These results are according to a survey commissioned by Redfin in August of 2022 of roughly 1,000 respondents who said they'd intended to buy or sell a home in the following 12 months. So you can see there's all kinds of factors that mitigate whether or not someone's going to buy a home or where they're going to buy it at. Insurance costs are going to go crazy in the state of Florida. That's why I suggest that if you are going to purchase a home, the very first thing that you always do is get your mortgage in place, know how much money you can afford. Your credit score that you see that you can pull up is different than what a lender sees. So it's always important to talk to them first. You want to know what your payment's going to be out the door, because those calculators online are not always as accurate as a lender can give you. And then you want to take that house and you want to give it to your insurance broker, and you want them to tell you, what is my insurance rate going to be on this property? And then you want to look at flood insurance as well to make sure that you can afford that as well. And, just be safe, be smart. And even if you're a seller, all of these things factor into what you're doing. And it's why you pay a real estate agent a percentage of your deal to get it done and to make sure that everybody's happy and taken care of, and everything's done that needs to be done to make sure that the deal is solid and protected. My name is Michelle Flood. I work with eXp Realty. I've been a real estate agent in the state of Florida for almost 16 years. If you want to buy or sell any kind of real estate, my contact information and everything will be in the description box, and so will be a link to this article and my website. I'll see you guys on Wednesday for something probably more whimsical than this. I hope you have a great day. See ya.